They called us a threat. Savages. A fire that needed to be extinguished. And then they cast us into the dark. No weapons, no allies, no future. But they forgot one simple thing. When you corner a beast, it doesn't scream. It learns how to bite. 100 years of rejection. A century forged in silence. And now we have returned. And the entire galaxy will have to look again from the very beginning. The Day of Judgment. The atmosphere inside the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was suffocating thick as molten lead. And yet, not a single breath could be heard beneath the alien respiration masks or biomechanical armor that filled the tiered seating. Above, the ceiling shimmered like cascading stardust, an ever-shifting lattice of organic light, sensor-reactive alloys, and layered crystalline structures. Representatives from thousands of civilizations watched in utter silence. At the center of it, Allen Trial was Earth. Admiral J. Kim stood tall at the rear of the Earth delegation, her spine a rigid line of defiance. She wore no ceremonial robe, no medaled uniform, just a simple black officer's suit, the fabric matte and unadorned. But in that simplicity was an edge sharper than any diplomatic gesture in the room. At the central platform, Secretary June delivered his final appeal. His voice trembled not from fear but from the quiet knowledge that the Council had already stopped listening. We have overcome a dark past. We've healed divisions, ended our wars, and stabilized our planet's climate. We are not here to demand anything. We come with open hands, ready to serve, to learn. He bowed slightly. Silence followed. No applause, no nods, not even the courtesy of acknowledgement. Kim's gaze scanned the Council's core members, the 6 founding species of the Galactic Union. No two looked alike. Krell, towering insectoids with glowing circulatory veins beneath layers of chitin. Mithrin, sentient gaseous beings suspended in floating crystalline canisters. Daxians, 4-armed creatures whose skin shimmered like molten plasma alloy. And 3 others beings so alien, even after a month of interaction, Kim could not describe them in human terms. And yet, for all their biological diversity, they shared one unmistakable trait. Their decision had been made. It was the Daxian who spoke first. His voice came through the translators as the sound of cracking bones, crisp and unsettling. We have reviewed humanity's historical data. No species in the Council's records has spent as much of its evolutionary timeline immersed in warfare as yours. A ripple of whispers murmured through the Grand Hall. Your economies were once built on conquest. Your greatest technological leaps emerged during conflicts. Your entertainment glorifies violence, packages it as art. Secretary June tried to interject, but one of the Krell lifted a single Antonath gesture alone, activated his translation field. Risk assessment is conclusive. Your biological and sociological data indicate that humanity evolved through competition, not cooperation. That instinct makes you a critical destabilization factor to galactic peace. Admiral Kim didn't flinch. Her hands remained calmly clasped behind her back. The accusations, while exaggerated, weren't entirely untrue. But they had been stripped of nuance, removed from context, weaponized into condemnation. Humanity was far from perfect, but they were changing. After quiet murmuring among the Council's leaders, a new figure emerged. A being of liquid metal, formless and eyeless, slid to the front. It vibrated slightly, voice created through harmonic resonance. The Council's decision is unanimous. Earth is hereby classified as Type 3, technologically developed but unfit for integration. Your species is to be isolated within the Sol system. Any attempt at interstellar movement will be deemed an act of war. The words dropped like a death sentence on humanity's dreams of reaching the stars. June staggered. His hand gripped the edge of the podium. But Admiral Kim remained motionless. Her eyes never left the Council's center. One last voice tried to reason. A scientist, Dr. Han, humanity's top scientific envoy, stepped forward holding a data tablet. Our competitive nature also drove innovations in medicine, renewable energy. We're more than what your files report. We're more than the wars we've survived. But the Mithrin responded coolly, its inner light pulsing in muted indifference. Those technologies could have been developed by cooperative species without the inherent risk you present. There would be no second chance, no appeals, no renegotiation, no opportunity for redemption. The Earth delegation was escorted out. Hovering cube-shaped security drones floated behind them, silent, emotionless sentinels. Only Admiral Kim understood more deeply than anyone. This wasn't peace. This was fear disguised as morality. As they walked toward the transport shuttle, Lieutenant Choi, a young officer beside her, whispered, "They're making a mistake, aren't they, Admiral?" Kim didn't turn her head. Her reply was calm, sharp, a grave one. Their shuttle launched. As Earth grew closer in the viewport, its vibrant blue hues filled the cockpit breathtaking, alive, and luminous. But to Kim, it now looked like something else entirely, a prison. She stared through the glacier heart, cold, her jaw set. They think they've contained a threat, but what they've done is create one. Prometheus rises beneath the scorched crust of the Nevada desert where sunlight never reached and no satellite signal could penetrate. A small team worked in silence to resurrect what the entire galaxy had tried to bury forever: hope. There were no flags, no slogans, no insignias of any nation or institution. In this place, only one symbol was allowed to exist: Prometheus, the code name of the most secretive project in human history since the first boot touched the moon. Admiral J. Kim did not stand on a podium. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to make the room hum with tension. Before her stood hundreds of faces: physicists, engineers, strategists, special ops soldiers, and test pilots, all handpicked not just for their brilliance, but for one unshakable quality. They refused to accept the ending written by the Galactic Council. "We have no way back," Kim said, her voice low but echoing like an ancient war drum across the room. "And that is exactly why we will win, because the ones with nothing left to lose are always the most dangerous." Silence. Project Prometheus was not a conventional military response. It was a scientific crusadia journey, carved through scarcity, desperation, and defiance of physical law. It aimed to rip open the very door to the stars that the Council had slammed shut with their decree of cosmic exile. But Prometheus's greatest weapon wasn't alien tech scavenged during Earth's diplomatic mission. It was human will. Fragile data fragments, leaked signal patterns from alien hulls, volatile energy field analysevery clue, no matter how faint, had been dissected, refined, and tested as if the survival of the species depended on it. Because, in truth, it did. In an underground lab where darkness felt denser than oxygen, Dr. Park Ji-won stared at a cascading matrix of equations suspended mid-air in a 3D display. 18 years of tireless research, no holidays, no daylight, no applause, had been poured into proving one theory the galaxy considered pure fantasy. Space could be bent, and humans could bend it. When the first prototype activated a softly glowing torus hovering in the containment chamber, no one dared breathe. A drone was pushed into its center, and then it vanished. No explosion, no flash. Just a gentle pulse and a cold voice from the monitor. "Signal received. Device has re-emerged in orbit around Neptune." 2 seconds of stunned silence. Then the room exploded. Cheers, tears, laughter, disbelief. But Park did not cheer. He gripped the edge of the console like a man anchoring himself to reality, afraid that letting go would wake him from a dream. Thousands of miles away, at the command base deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Kim received the transmission. Park's face flickered onto her screen, eyes dark with exhaustion but alive with something more. He said just one line: "It works. We've broken the first chain." Kim didn't smile, but her eyes flared like a blade freshly drawn from fire. "Initiate Phase 2, she ordered. 9 months later, within the hollowed rock of the moon, the first human interstellar vessel was completed. Its name, GSV Prometheus. It carried no weapons-only conviction. Armored in adaptive frequency reactive plating and powered by humanity's first functional space-time folding engine, Prometheus wasn't just a ship. It was a declaration, a burning message carved in metal, sent into the void. We are still here. Its maiden voyage took it 12 light-years beyond Earth, to a quiet asteroid belt, untouched by Council surveillance. There, Prometheus established humanity's first off-world outpost, a recycling facility, a mining station, and a safe haven. But above all, it was a monument proof that the Galactic Council had misjudged humanity, and that the price of that error had just begun to accumulate. Admiral Kim wasn't aboard, but as she watched the vessel slip through the shadows beyond the moon's orbit, her breath caught, not from fear, but from the weight of a dream she once thought lost now, rising like a phoenix from ash. They believed exile would make us forget the stars, but exile only made us hunger for them. They thought they had caged us, but they never understood. She paused, watching the Prometheus vanish into the void. Humans don't build cages. We build wings. The dark solar system. No one outside of Earth knew that humanity's fight for survival had never truly ended. It had only gone underground into the shadows. And within that very darkness, a new empire was beginning to take shape. Since the successful escape of GSV Prometheus through the Galactic Council's quarantine perimeter, expansion plans had been set into motion faster than anything ever recorded in human history. But this time, there were no press releases, no broadcasts. It was a silent campaign, unfolding across the entire solar system, where every planet, every moon, every drifting rock could be turned into a covert node in a hidden network only humans understood. Beneath the icy crust of Callisto's dark hemisphere, buried under miles of frozen silence, Station Borealis came to life. A fully automated facility, research center, fusion core, and spacecraft foundry operating, without beacons, without signal emissions. Its exterior was cloaked in radiation-absorbing composite, rendering it indistinguishable from dead rock. Even the Council's advanced sensors couldn't see it. On Mars, geo-bioengineers launched Project Red Respiration, converting the planet's dense CO2 atmosphere into bioenergy for sustaining life. Massive domes began to rise, each a self-sufficient habitat, shielding life without external support. Beneath the crust, an expanding network of drone-carved tunnels snaked through the ground, connecting refineries, storage chambers, and fabrication plants built from asteroid harvests. On Titan, Saturn's shrouded moon, engineers trialed a revolutionary communication method: quantum entanglement messaging, untraceable, unjammable. They called it the Whisper in the Mista system, capable of linking off-world colonies beyond the Council's reach, issuing commands with no digital footprint. Admiral Kim called the growing network the Dark Solar System, not because it was sinister, but because it existed outside the glare of galactic politics and surveillance. Every base, every craft, every lab was encoded with a triple-tiered system. Anonymous, unfixed, unseen. They existed on no official star map, and if discovered, they could be dismantled and vanish within hours. But the greatest asset of the Dark Solar System wasn't machinery or metals. It was faith, a shared conviction that what they built was bigger than themselves. To support expanding logistics, Dr. Park and his team pushed development of the Mark II full drive faster, more stable, capable of carrying heavy payloads. This innovation didn't just let humanity leave the solar system. It allowed them to return with treasures, resources, encrypted data, and even whispers from species long forgotten by the galaxy. A new fleet was born, the Shadowfall class. Vessels with near-total invisibility, equipped with sound nullification fields, wave-absorbing hulls, and adaptive optic camouflage. To scanners and sensors, they were nothing more than cosmic static ghosts among stars. With the first Shadowfall ships active, Kim launched Project Hermes, a classified mission to chart the galactic rim, intercept faint transmissions, locate unregistered civilizations, and, if possible, establish relationships before the Council ever found them. Every signal intercepted, every decoded language, every anomaly analyzed was elevated to strategic priority. Already there had been brushes with the unknown. A derelict freighter marked by symbols no known species had ever claimed. A dormant energy outpost older than most stars still humming in isolation. And in every case, humans arrived first. That was Admiral Kim's singular goal: stay one step ahead. No wars, no provocations, but never again would Earth be caught off guard. She knew the day would come. The Council's patience had limits, and when they realized the exiled species was building a shadow empire across dozens of light years, they would retaliate with sanctions, traps, or war if necessary. But when that day arrived, Earth would not be alone. They would no longer be the weak child begging for entry into a fading alliance. They would be a forged, force-tempered, in silence and shadow, armed with independent technology, hidden allies, and an unshakable vision. At a covert session within Station Borealis, Kim stood before a three-dimensional star map. Each human colony appeared as a tiny blue ember, scattered across the stars like fireflies in a midnight field. Each ember was a life, a spark of rebellion, a promise. "They think we died in the dark," she said, her voice soft yet metallic, carrying through the silent chamber. "They don't realize we've learned how to see through it. The day we could not stay silent, they once swore they would never interfere, never be seen, never draw the Council's gaze while the shadows still offered cover. But then came Karanand, every oath shattered like glass. The HSV Defiant, a stealth warship of the Shadowfall class, was conducting a deep space survey near the edge of the Cygnus constellation when it intercepted a repeating radio pulse. Primitive, crude frequency, a pattern almost identical to ancient Morse code. They didn't find a mineral-rich planet. They didn't find a derelict outpost. They found a civilization just beginning to speak to the stars. Karan was a blue, world-white clouds, wide ocean serially similar to early industrial-era Earth. The native species were humanoid, with semi-transparent skin that shifted color with emotion. Gentle, curious, just beginning to master steam engines and electricity. Defiant held position in high orbit, cloaked. Its scans captured the first footage. Gaslit towns glowing at night. Crude observatories aimed toward the sky. Speeches filled with wonder about the possibility of life beyond the clouds. Captain Elena Lee, mission commander and former protege of Admiral Kim, had planned only to observe, to record. But fate has no respect for restraint. 2 weeks later, a massive vessel split the stratosphere in a blaze of red light and thunder. The insignia was unmistakable. Exalter Corporation, a resource extraction conglomerate sanctioned by the Council. No warnings, no diplomacy. They came to turn Karan into a mine. What followed wouldn't be called war. It would be extinction. Defiant surveillance caught it all. Atmospheric processors descending, planetary scale, carbon extractors activating. If the terraforming cycle continued, over 90% of Karan's native life, including its sentient species, would be unable to breathe within 3 weeks. And no one else knew. Only Defiant stood between an innocent world and oblivion. The crew erupted into heated debate. Command orders were clear: no contact, no interference. But Captain Lee, who once believed some laws must be broken to preserve higher truths, made her decision. "We used to be them," she said quietly, eyes fixed on footage of Karani children playing on a pale beach, blissfully unaware of the death screaming through their skies. "No one saved us when we were in the dark. Now we don't have the right to stay silent." She ordered Defiant to decloak. 2 escort ships, HSV Swift and HSV Horizon, were summoned into position. 3 human vessels armed with next-gen stealth systems, old-school tactics, and hearts forged in exile formed a barrier of steel between Charon and annihilation. A comms channel opened. The screen revealed the Exalter Commandera, towering insectoid with 6 eyes and a voice like grinding metal. It didn't hide its surprise. Your identification does not exist in any known registry. This vessel operates under full Council authorization. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Captain Lee didn't blink. This is the ship Defiant. The planet below is home to an emerging sentient race. You have no right to extinguish it. Who are you? The Exalter asked again, this time in a tremor-laced resonance uncertainty crawling into its modulation. Lee drew a breath. We are from Earth. The words hit like a forbidden incantation. Within seconds, Exalter's ship went into full battle mode. A blazing beam of energy lanced toward Defiant's shield, exploding in a pulse of violent light. Shields holding 87%, reported the systems officer. Lee nodded. Return fire. Disable only. No kills. Using micron precision targeting, Defiant and its escorts unleashed a calculated counterattack aimed at propulsion, targeting arrays and power cores. Within minutes, the Exalter warship drifted crippled, unable to retaliate. Then, a second transmission. The insectoid appeared again, visibly rattled. What are you? Lee's smile was cold as frost. We are what the Council fears most. Humanity, unchained. The incident at Charon couldn't be buried. 1 week later, the Council received an alert. Unknown ships, unauthorized intervention, hostile disabling of licensed operations, self-identified as human. Shockwaves rippled through the assembly. They had believed Earth was imprisoned, contained. Now they realized they'd been outmaneuvered. Back on Earth, Admiral Kim received Defiant's full battle report. She didn't reprimand. She didn't discipline. She simply looked up at the galactic map, every minor world like Charon already under exploitation. We can't hide forever, but we can choose the moment we step into the light. Charon became that moment. After 50 years of exile, humanity returned to the stars. Not with apologies, not with petitions, but by protecting a world no one else dared to see. The Alliance from the Shadow. When humanity defended Charon, they weren't just protecting a young civilization. They ignited a signal ripple the Galactic Council never expected. It awakened voices long silenced. Species once deemed useless. Worlds discarded for not fitting the Council's evolutionary standards. And one by one, the forgotten began to look to Earth. At an isolated research outpost hidden deep within the icy rings of the frozen planet Gliese 12, a Terran probe intercepted an unregistered signal. The transmission wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't a distress call. It was just one sentence. We saw your light in the dark. If you are not like the Council, come. That message would mark the first contact with the Nara crystalline species who lived in the slowness of stone. They had been exiled for a reason the Council never admitted publicly. Their biological cycles were too long. They lived for centuries. They learned slowly. They adapted like tectonic plates. The Council labeled them socially incompatible with galactic society. But the Nar were not weak. They held ancient crystal knowledge, a form of intelligence, not stored in computers, but in harmonic resonances etched across their bodies. Their memories formed a living archivia network that could last thousands of years without decay. And the first thing they offered Earth was knowledge. Over the next 3 years, a quiet revolution unfolded. 23 species, each one officially rejected, silenced, or erased by the Council, reached out to humanity. Some could not breathe oxygen, but spoke through psychic resonance. Others lived within magma oceans, their thoughts pulsing like planet-sized fungal webs. Still, others existed as crystalline souls, imprisoned in higher dimensions, dismissed only because their existence couldn't be measured by the Council's limited definition of life. all of them shared one truth. They were not welcome. They were regulated. They had been erased. But now they faced a choice they had never been offered. Not to beg for acceptance, but to be welcomed as allies. Admiral J. Kim, now past her 90th year, yet still sharp as tempered steel, saw the moment clearly. It wasn't enough to survive in the shadows. It wasn't enough to fight back ship by ship, world by world. "It's time," she said, during a covert assembly at Callisto Station, one of Jupiter's shadow satellites. "Time to name what we're building. It is no longer just Earth. No longer humanity against the stars. It is a union of those cast aside, dismissed, branded dangerous. We are the heart of something new." And so, a name was born that day. The Shadow Confederation. Not because it sounded beautiful, but because it was true. They didn't pretend they hadn't lived in the dark. They owned it, and they turned the darkness into territory. The Charter of the Confederation was signed by 24 species, including humanity. No racial hierarchy. No founding species. No clause defining proper evolution or standard life forms. Just 3 fundamental laws. Any civilization with sentient intelligence has the right to exist and evolve. No species holds a monopoly on truth. To defend the vulnerable is not a burden, it is an honor. The founding of the Confederation wasn't just politics. It was a civilizational turning point. Within 6 months, trade networks, research coalitions, and mutual defense pacts sprang to life across shadow colonies. Earth sent out medical experts, engineers, linguists, and diplomatic specialists. In return, they received resonant crystal energy, biomatter manipulation, and most notably quantum fold engines developed by the Vane, a species with no fixed form, but an unrivaled grasp on how to bend physical reality without massive energy input. Their gifts weren't just tools. They were philosophies in machine form. At the first full gathering of the Shadow Confederation at Callisto Station, representatives of all 24 species assembled. There were no ornate banners, no hollow rituals, just presence bodies of light, crystal, plasma, horn, tentacle, mist, shadow, and Admiral Kim standing before them, eyes brighter than ever. She didn't give a long speech. Just one sentence translated instantly into 24 languages. They thought exile was the end. We made it our beginning. The chamber erupted. In applause, in waves of light, in vibrations, in sonar clicks and pheromone bursts, every species showing respect in their own sacred way. In the very dark the council believed would bury them, a new light was kindled, not from any sun, but from the hearts of those the galaxy chose to forget. And that light would not fade. The century of exile, ending the sentence, 100 years. That's how long it had been since the Galactic Council sentenced humanity to isolation, banning them from the stars, from interstellar cooperation, from even the hope of redemption. They thought that was the end. What they didn't understand was this. When you cage fire, you don't extinguish it. You force it to burn in silence until the day it erupts hot enough to incinerate the cage. Today was that day. Eos Prime, the new diplomatic hub of the Shadow Confederation, bloomed in the void like a silver lotus suspended in darkness. Each petal was a ring kilometers wide, dedicated to trade, science, and diplomacy. 50 species called this place neutral ground. A century ago, it hadn't even existed. At its center stood Callisto Hall, and for the first time in 100 years, the Galactic Council had sent a formal delegation, not to lecture, not to pass judgment, but to negotiate. Chancellor Rhea Sun, granddaughter of Admiral J. Kim and current leader of the Confederation, stood at the observation deck of the High Chamber. She watched as the incoming ships approached. One bore the sigil of the Mithrin, another Daxian, the third Krell. Each carried minimalist markings, no grand insignias. Even the Council's pride now traveled cloaked in humility. "They've arrived," said Trell, diplomatic advisor from the Nar species. His voice rang like resonant crystal. "Are we ready?" Ria's reply was steady as carved obsidian. "We were born ready for this day." The meeting chamber had once been modeled after the Council's own architecture. Now it stood transformed, a monument to reversal. Not judgment, but parity. Ria stepped forward, surrounded by the founding representatives of 12 allied species. They didn't sit beneath her. They stood beside Heracles, no pedestals, no throne. Across the table, the Council's emissaries held a moment of stunned silence. Perhaps they were surprised, or perhaps they were sensing something no scan or data model could express. The atmosphere no longer carried fear. It had turned into gravitas, a new kind of gravity. The Mithran delegate spoke first, its voice a pulse in ambient gas. "The Shadow Confederation is considered an illegitimate entity under Article 472 of the Galactic Union Charter." Rhea raised a hand not to interrupt, but to anchor the moment. "A century ago, you declared humanity unworthy of inclusion. You locked us out, stripped us of access. You condemned us to isolation in the dark." She paused. "And from that darkness, we built what you haven't managed in 20,000 years. A union not based on sameness, but on embraced difference. Not on authority, but on consensus. Not on fear, but on respect." Silence fell. The Council didn't rebut. They couldn't. Outside the chamber, through the vast transparent panels, reality spoke louder than words. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species docked in harmony. No war, no chaos, only a new order. Over the next 2 days, the Confederation presented its living proof. A multi-planet ecological support system. Non-exclusive technology academies shared across species. A protection network for early civilizations, defending against exploitation. Over 70 independent worlds had joined under a dual framework. Coexistence without assimilation. Finally, the Daxian envoy spoke, his voice deep like cracking stone. "Perhaps our judgment a century ago was premature." Ria didn't smile. She simply nodded. "Perhaps, but that doesn't matter now. We're not here to reclaim honor. We're here to offer a choice." She turned to the far window, where Earth shimmered softly, its blue glow undimmed by time. "Peace. Not because we fear war, but because we understand now true strength isn't measured by weaponry. It's measured by our ability to rebuild what was once destroyed. As we rebuilt ourselves." That day, a historic dual accord was signed between the Shadow Confederation and the Galactic Council. No more masters and subordinates. No more arbiters and accused. 2 civilizations standing eye to eye. During the ceremonial signing, a young council envoy, eyes shining with a flicker of something more than protocol, asked Rhea, "Do you feel no hatred, no resentment for a century of exile?" Rhea looked at him for a long moment, then replied not with anger, but with something older, deeper. "We had 100 years to think, and we realized anger cannot build galaxies. Only justice and wisdom forged in darkness can do that." As the Council ships departed from Eos Prime that evening, they no longer looked at humanity as a threat. They saw something they had never allowed themselves to imagine. A species once rejected, returned, not as conquerors, but as healers. The next door, the treaty was signed. The Council departed. But the celebration never came. No champagne, no parades, no triumphant speeches declaring victory, because those who had endured a century of exile knew the truth. Every milestone is merely the beginning of a greater journey. And so, in the hush of the first sunset ever recognized by galactic law on Eos Primea City, born of Shadow and Defiancia, signal arrived. A quantum entanglement transmission. Direct, silent, unmistakably intentional. No language, no voice. Just a cascade of light frequencies, vibrating in symmetrical, repeating patterns ordered to be natural, too foreign to belong to any known species. Origin: outer Sagittarius arm. Beyond the furthest charted boundary, the region was thought to be dead space and no habitable stars, no planets of note, no trade routes. And yet the signal persisted. Strong, deliberate, alive. Within 7 minutes, Chancellor Rhea Sun was briefed. By the time she entered Central Strategy Command, every screen was alive with luminescent waveforms, dancing like holographic glyphs. Dr. Avon, Chief of Signal Decryption, spoke cautiously. "We've ruled out all known noise patterns. This isn't a cosmic anomaly, not natural emission. This is structure." "What kind of structure?" Rhea asked. "A communicative system with cognition. It doesn't resemble AI. It doesn't resemble biological thought either. It's something in between." She didn't need to hear more. Within 24 hours, an emergency assembly convened. All founding members of the Shadow Confederation were present: crystal beings, gas forms, flesh, plasma, sentient spores, higher dimensional minds. They all understood. This signal wasn't about Earth. This was bigger than any one world. It was either an invitation or a test. And they would respond together. Rhea stood in the center of the hall, draped in deep cobalt robes laced with Silvera, symbol of unity, not authority. She stood as Admiral Kim once had, 100 years before. But her voice held a different note. Not defiance, not vengeance, but longing, the yearning to open the final door. We were born from rejection. We endured because we learned to rise in darkness. And today, while the galaxy is still learning to accept us, perhaps the universe itself is calling. Not to fight, not to conquer, but to ask, what lies beyond what anyone has ever known? The vote was nearly unanimous. Only one abstention due to caution, not opposition. 3 days later, the vessel was ready. Pathfinder O'Nia, deep-range, long-duration exploration ship, was launched. Its crew, 15 hand-picked explorers, chosen not for strength or weaponry, but for adaptability, empathy, and vision. Each from a different world, each carrying the hopes of species once forgotten. It wasn't a warship, not a fortress, not a probe of conquest. It was a hand extended into the void, not with a blade, but with a question. Before departure, Rhea was invited aboard. No ceremony, no applause. She entered the bridge, placed one hand on the observation window, gazing toward distant Earth still glowing blue across the stars, and whispered, "Thank you for exiling us." No sarcasm, no bitterness, just truth. Because if humanity had never been cast out, they might still be arguing beneath their own skies, divided by borders, by language, by fear. Had they not been denied, they might never have learned to bond with those most unlike themselves, not through words, but through a silent, shared gaze between beings that simply want to live, understand, and go further. Pathfinder 1 slipped quietly from Callisto Station's orbit. No fanfare, only silence. But behind it trailed the echo of an old galaxy, long convinced it was complete. Now it opened to something else. A new chapter, a new star map, a new epic. Written not by the founders, not by conquerors, but by the very ones once deemed unworthy to speak. And this time, they wouldn't ask permission to step through the door. They were the door. No one knew how far Pathfinder 1 had truly gone. After breaching the final mapped boundary of the galactic frontier, its signal began to waver, then vanished entirely. No distress beacon, no cry for help. Just one final log entry, encrypted in a hybrid language formed from the symbols of 12 different species. We have never seen this in any linguistic system, but we all understood it not with the mind, but with something older than light. Something saw us. Then the silence closed in. For the next 7 years, the Shadow Confederation made no public statements. But behind closed doors, high-level councils convened. They didn't know if Pathfinder 1 still existed, but no one called it a failure, because failure only exists when you stop moving forward. And humanity, along with the allies it had found at the edges of the void, had vowed they would never stop. On Earth, a monument was quietly erected on the moon's surface. There was no ceremony, no towering sculpture of victory or tribute to lost heroes. Just a slab of black stone, standing beneath a sky that never changed. No wind, no time, no forgetting. Etched in hundreds of known languages, along with several that had never been spoken aloud, were the words, "Here." A condemned species looked up and refused to look away. They did not win with fire. They won with an unyielding gaze that would not bow. Admiral J. Kim did not live to see Pathfinder 1 launch. She passed peacefully in her sleep at age 108, deep beneath the ocean in the same command center where Project Prometheus had once been born. Her final words, recorded in her strategic journal, became a kind of prophecy. If anyone out there ever asks, does humanity deserve to exist? Tell them this: we don't exist to be praised. We exist to continue. Then, in the 11th year since Pathfinder 1's departure, something changed. Helios 9, an abandoned satellite station floating in the so-called Eternal Quiet Zone, flickered to life. Most thought it was an error, a ghost ping, until 3 independent sources confirmed the data. It was real, but it wasn't a distress signal, not scientific telemetry, not even a warning. It was something else. A sequence of ancient glyphs translated into one line of human language. We reached the place where the map ends. And there, the universe met us not with fear, but with curiosity. We are no longer of Earth. We are bearers of light. We will return not to belong, but to invite those who never believed they were worthy to step out of the dark. No one could say for certain if the message was authentic. But back at Callisto Station, beneath the scaffolding of a new vessel, Pathfinder 2's single inscription was being engraved onto the hull. Not bold, not glowing, but impossible to erase. Forged in Nar alloy and living plasma gifted by the Valathi. We are the children of exile. We are the echo from the abyss. And now, we are the ones who open the way. If this story awakened something in you, a deep memory, a dormant dream, or even just a small flicker of belief that humanity still holds something sacred to offer the stars, like this video, subscribe, and share it with those still walking in the dark, searching for a reason to keep going. Because maybe, just maybe one day, you will be the one who brings the light.